Welcome to the Phil Vogel podcast, where we talk dealership mergers and acquisitions, as well as all the other elements affecting dealers' operations, trends, and technology. So if you like what you see and hear today, please hit the subscribe button. And if you don't care for what you hear or see, please hit the subscribe button as well. Today's show's sponsor is Vogel Strategies. Vogel Strategies is the boutique automobile dealership mergers and acquisitions firm based at the tip of Silicon Valley on the San Francisco Peninsula. Vogel Strategies does little to no marketing, but rather relies on their reputation of getting deals closed, clear lines of communication, managing expectations, and over-delivering superior results for their dealers. VogelStrategies.com. So I've really been looking forward to this show because we are going to be talking autonomous EV delivery vehicle technology. Daniel Laury is the founder and CEO of UDELV. You spell that UDELV. And I'd like to, at this point, welcome to our show without any further ado, Daniel Laury. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's great to have you. I'm glad we finally got connected between your schedules and mine. And anyway, I'm really excited about this. It's a little bit different kind of show for our audience, but I know that our audience is very interested will be very interested to hear what you have to say about your vehicles, UDELV, and the industry as a whole as it pertains to autonomous driving and EV technology. And so why don't we start with tell us a little bit about what UDELV is and really what your vision for the company was when you started it.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. I think we've got to put this in a broader context, which is the revolution in the automobile world and transportation in general. It's a revolution like we haven't seen in more than 100 years. It's the combination of electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles that lead us to the situation today where new things are possible when automobiles become computers on wheels. And that's what we realized when we started UDELV just about a little less than 4 years ago, with the idea that the first large-scale application of an autonomous vehicle would be delivery. The reason is that it's easier and safer to carry goods than it is to carry people. And therefore, as the public gradually gets more accustomed to those autonomous vehicles, it makes sense to get started with delivery. So we created the world's first autonomous delivery vehicle for public roads in January 2018. That was our first generation vehicle. We unveiled it in California, in San Mateo, California, just a few miles away from where you are, Phil. And we did the world's first autonomous delivery from a grocery store in San Mateo called Draeger's to a couple of customers in the area and then back to the store. And that was a big deal because it's never been done before. Of course, we had a safety operator behind the wheel, but the whole vehicle was fully autonomous. L4 autonomy, what we call it in jargon. We learned lessons from this first generation vehicle over about 1,400 deliveries in California during the course of 2018. And realized the limitations of what we'd built in the first place when it comes to the speed of the vehicle, the range, the way the cargo space was created, and came up with a second generation vehicle that we unveiled at CES 2022, this time on the base of a Ford Transit Connect chassis, which allowed us to go faster and further away from the store, and a completely new cargo space that we invented and patented that I'll explain in a few minutes.
Sure.
That is dedicated for automated deliveries, basically automating a delivery driver journey, which is a very complex task. And That with this vehicle, we did nearly 30,000 deliveries over the course of 2019, 2020, and the beginning of 2021, with a variety of different clients, and really nailed down
What
the
were some of those
technology.
applications? What were some of those applications, Daniel? The different
So we
clients.
started with
Curious,
groceries because
right?
we started with groceries because it looks like this is like what everybody else is thinking of doing. It makes sense in a way that when people order groceries, they're 95% of them are at home when the grocery gets delivered, so it's easier for you to come to the machine and retrieve your goods. But after a little while, we realized that maybe those were not the low-hanging fruits, and the low-hanging fruits would be more B2B deliveries, types of deliveries.
Hmm.
And in terms of autonomy, more fixed, repeatable routes, kind of routes, which led us to focus more over the past several months on a very big industry in the United States, which is the auto parts industry. It's a
Right.
$700 billion industry that is managing hundreds of thousands of vehicles in their fleets. And they have two types of routes called the sourcing routes and the hot shots. The sourcing routes are from a distribution center to a store, multiple stores, or from one store to other stores. And those are fixed, repeatable routes. So in areas that have less traffic, there are less pedestrians, because they're usually suburban areas of large cities. And so therefore, it is easier for an autonomous vehicle and the machine learning process to kind of learn its way towards being fully autonomous. And that's what we focused on. And there's a ton of businesses that need deliveries from a B2B standpoint.
Right. I could see. So it's fascinating. I mean, the technology that you've got, and we have some. I don't know if we've run the B-roll yet, or the vehicle, the roll yet of showing the vehicle. But how did you come up with this idea to start UDELV? I'm curious about that. I mean, how did it all come about?
Well, that's a slightly different story, but basically, I had sold my prior company and was
Hmm.
thinking about the next step. And I started a small venture capital fund here with my money and some friends' money here in Silicon Valley. And I wanted to invest in exponential technologies and do something that would really change the world. So
Mm.
I looked at various areas that are called so-called moonshots,
Sure.
drones, flying cars. I remember, having visited flying car companies, some sort of medical device, advanced medical devices, and that kind of thing that were really moonshots. And of course, autonomous driving was part of the industries that I was researching. And at the time in 2016, um, almost all of the autonomous driving companies were focused on robotaxis. And I was thinking
Mm.
that, this would not be the first application of autonomous driving. And I was looking for an investment in a autonomous delivery company, and I couldn't find one. So I said, okay, let's do it. And that's how I got started.
That's fascinating. The moonshot, and yeah, it's a huge space, and I can understand, why it would be attractive to an investor such as yourself. So one thing I read about, and you was recently, I guess it was in May of this year, Germany, the largest country in the EU, just approved, L4 autonomous vehicles on a federal level. So you mentioned level 4 technology. Can you kind of distinguish for the audience what the distinction is and what the impact of that approval means to the business?
Absolutely. Sure. First of all, though, I would like to make a couple of comments on what we just said before. The
Sure.
first comment is that the whole premise of the company, the mission, is to really improve people's lives. Because right now, what deliveries with COVID and other factors have grown massively, and the growth rate for e-commerce and home deliveries is going through the roof.
Huge.
And
Right.
What's happening is that we're facing a massive shortage of drivers, and so this is something that's absolutely needed to continue to improve people's lives and give them shorter delivery windows and more precise location. With a vehicle that's computer based and computer driven, you could say, well, now I want to get my toothpaste at 6:15 p.m.
Right.
at Starbucks while I'm meeting with a friend, and this is something that was not even with Prime on Amazon. You get next day delivery, which means it's a 24-hour window. You might want to be more precise than that, and you want to get something that's cheaper than anything else that's been done before, and you want to make our roads safer, and you want to lower the carbon emissions, and that's all what UDELV is about. The mission is to improve people's lives. The second comment I want to make is that we are currently working on the third generation vehicle with all the lessons that we learned from the prior two generations that I was explaining before. And this is the one that you saw on this small video clip, which is going to be something that's never been done before. It's a vehicle that has no cabin, no seats, no seat belts, nothing that costs a lot of money in a vehicle. It's literally an electric skateboard, which is a platform that's fully electric, with our innovative and patented cargo pod on top of it that has this adaptive shelving mechanism and iris mechanism to be able for you to retrieve your goods without taking somebody else's.
Right.
And that is something that is absolutely fundamental. We're literally reinventing the business of deliveries here of last mile delivery. So that's what this is about, and this is the ambition of this company, is to become one of the largest logistics companies in the world with this vehicle. To get back to your question on Germany and L4, I think it's related to legislation. And yes, Germany is the first country in Europe to have allowed L4 autonomy. The United States is ahead of the pack because in some states you can already do this, and you've been able to do this already for quite a bit of time in Arizona, Texas, Florida, even California with a certain type of permit. So we've had a very, very favorable legislation in the United States, and I would commend the legislator and upper and agencies and at the state and federal level to have allowed us to do that. Finally, to finish on your questions, L4 autonomy means full autonomy within a certain so-called ODD, operating design domain, which means a geographical location that is determined, and some other conditions that are determined. For example, could be weather conditions, like you don't drive when it's snowing, or right. Some other types of conditions. So that's L4 autonomy. There are 5 levels of autonomy, from L0 to actually 6 from L0 to L5. What most luxury vehicles today, including Tesla, are doing is advanced L2 and getting towards L3. What is very, very important to understand is the distinction that happens between L3 and L4 and an L5. So up to L3, the redundancy, the safety redundancy, is the driver. So the driver has to be in control at all times in order to be able to take control of the vehicle if something happens. So it's essentially what we call enhanced ADAS, advanced systems. When you start talking about L4 and L5, the human is no longer the redundancy, but the computer is. So now you need to have a system that is fully redundant in terms of sensors, as well as compute and actuation of the controls of the vehicle in order for something to happen. If something happens, there is a redundant system that takes over. That's the difference that you have between L0 to L3 and L4. L5 is much, much further down the road. This means full autonomy everywhere in the world under any type of circumstances. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, I think that it'll take several more years to get there.
Hmm. So fascinating. I mean, thank you for explaining the different levels. I, I was going to ask. So that you really clarify that. Is there anything that the transports can't carry? I mean, in terms of the not size restriction wise, but any kind of electronics that might interfere with the sensors or the technology of the vehicle?
No, I don't think that there is anything that's forbidden. It's really about size, dimensions, and weight. Um, I think that autonomous last mile delivery is going to be practical for goods that do not need someone to carry it. So it means that goods that are relatively smaller in size and what, like
Mm,
a mattress or a type of certain type of furniture would probably not be a good candidate for that
right.
because it's bulky and it
Sure.
requires someone to help you carry it. But you know that 85% of what Amazon delivers weighs less than 6 pounds. So
Mm.
uh, there's a lot of things that we can deliver.
And so for our audience, I've seen this vehicle. It's very slick and it's fascinating, the technology. And um, I'm wondering, so around where both Daniel and I are here in the San Francisco Bay Area, you see there's a lot of startups around here between Waymo and what have you. But I'm curious as to, I used to see a lot of vehicles, out there, whether it's Shift or Waymo, and in their, the Google had all their mapping vehicles out there, and what have you. I haven't seen too many other kind of vehicles out there being testing the roads. Is there a reason beyond? I mean, the L3, L4, the level of their technology, or when do you foresee us actually seeing autonomous vehicles on the road?
I think if you're talking about California and the Bay Area in particular, there's two concerns, two reasons. Uh, One is local, which is that the DMV of California requires that all the data that are linked to your autonomous rides be public. And
Mm,
it can sometimes create some distortion between uh, uh, different autonomous driving companies in terms of in terms of what is publicly released. And so some companies might feel that they are better off testing in states like Arizona or Texas, where there's no requirements for public reporting of the
mm,
data, the number of miles that they're driving, the number of
sure.
disengagements, etc. That's what's one reason. But the second reason is, more general reason, which is that it's massively expensive to create an autonomous driving company. So at this point in 2021, you no longer have nowhere near as many companies as you had in 2017, where you had startups. This industry has consolidated to a point where you only have basically six major players, or like half a dozen major players in the United States. And that's the reason why in San Francisco you see mostly Google and Cruise, which are local,
Sure.
operating here, and it's just by themselves. There's just a third of the companies that are operating in the space.
So you mentioned a second ago the different states and what have you, like California, Arizona, and but which states are leading the way in terms of L4 adoption legislation?
I would say that Arizona and Texas are probably leading the way. I mean, in the United States, you have 41 states out of 50 that have enacted some sort of legislation that is favorable to autonomous vehicles these days. But there are lots of differences between them. And to date, Arizona and Texas are probably the ones that are the most favorable. You can put a vehicle that has no steering wheel and no pedals on the roads in both of those states without having to ask for anyone the permission to do it other than just having a regular license plate. So it's a gigantic step towards helping the industry making progress because anybody can do it there.
Are there any states that are kind of antithetical to this, or that are working against it, the technology and legislation?
I don't think so. I don't think that any state is working against it. I think that what the industry is looking for is now have the federal level come up with regulation, and there are bills that are either passed or in discussions, as well as NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Safety
Right.
Agency, setting up some rules for autonomous vehicles. I think there was a bill that was passed by the House a couple years back, and that is being currently discussed at the Senate level right now. And I'm guessing that we're pretty close to having federal legislation allowing manufacturers for a certain number of vehicles to be exempt from the FMVSS standards. NHTSA is also working on it. And as far as delivery is concerned, because those vehicles do not intend to carry people, the legislator is going to be a little bit more favorable towards those vehicles as far as autonomous deliveries or autonomous driving is concerned, because at least you don't have to care about the people that are inside the vehicle. You only care about protecting the environment.
So, it's interesting. Assuming that we get, 40, 50 state adoption, and what have you, what are the other kind of milestones or barriers to complete adoption that you see for UDELV?
I think there's two types of milestones or two types of technology that are being developed here. One is the autonomous driving technology, and the other one is the automated delivery journey technology, and those are two different types of engineering problem to solve. Both of them hardcore. On the autonomous driving front of it, UDELV decided to made a historic decision of partnering with Mobileye, which in our view is one of the very best in the world, for at least a reason that they've mapped North America, Europe, and a portion of Asia in terms of 3D mapping, which is something that is needed for autonomous vehicle. And so therefore they're capable of scaling and ramping up faster than most other autonomous driving companies. And that is going to help UDELV ramp up very much faster than anyone else. So I think on the autonomous side, we need to figure out how much better we are than a human driver. That's the benchmark. You first want to be as good as a human driver, and if you think about it this way, is that there's about 40,000 fatalities on U.S. roads a year and I think there is about 3 trillion miles being driven. So that's one fatality every 86 million miles driven. And so you want to have a system that has a mean time before failure that is at least as good as that, but it's not good enough. And so what companies like us or Mobileye are aiming at is a factor of 10x and potentially even 100x better than human driving. So
human driving. Wow.
That's the goal, and we're very close.
Huge, brutal. That is a heavy lift.
It is.
I commend you for taking on the challenge. That's awesome.
It is a very lofty goal, but I think we're very close to being there. By 2023, we're going to be probably in that area. The second challenge is, which is not to be forgotten, is how do you automate a delivery journey. And that's a huge
Mm,
challenge because a human driver does much more than just driving, from turning on the vehicle in the morning, taking it out of the parking lot where it's overnight parked, sometimes underground, to taking it to a store, loading, unloading, sorting out packages, figuring out the route and optimizing that route,
well, you got the
coming
whole
back to
human component to that, right?
exactly. It is incredibly complicated. And I would say that the difference in last and middle mile delivery versus robotaxis and long haul trucking is that robotaxis and long haul trucking, you don't have to reinvent the business. People know how to get into a car and come out of the car. Maybe they'll have a fancier screen to watch a movie instead of driving, but it's basically the same thing. Long haul trucking is also not really modified. I mean, it's a trailer and you bulk at them, but for in there, but for last and middle mile delivery, you really need to create something that's never been done before, which is a compartmentalized cargo space where people can retrieve their goods without taking somebody else's. And
Right.
if you think about multiple stops and also the returning goods issue, and it is incredibly complicated. So it's a combination of hardware and software that we created. We call the Upod. It's a container basically that we put on that skateboard that is intelligent and cloud connected in order to achieve the mission of automating the delivery driver journey.
Yeah, the ability to customize the particular space is
Yes,
fascinating, and kind of a bespoke approach to, you can have a 2x2 space, you can have a 5x2 space, you can have a 1x1 space, right?
they absolutely, Phil. That's been a lot of the story at UDELV to figure that out. Because when we started and you deliver groceries and then you work with an industrial pharmacy and you start delivering drugs, pills,
Right,
which are relatively small, and then you move on to an auto parts company that has a muffler that or tire, that is 90 inches long. I mean, how do you fit that into a system? That's when we realized that fixed lockers on wheels was not the solution, because by
right.
definition they're either too big or too small for what you're going to carry. So we had to come up with something completely different. That's when we invented the system of adaptive shelvings, where you
So
can
you
add or remove.
invented that tech. You and UDELV, you guys invented that
Absolutely.
technology,
Absolutely. Yes.
and so
And we
you have
patent
IP
it's a
on that, right? And
yeah.
so that's a fascinating component to what you're doing.
Yeah,
I'm
because
curious.
the fundamental idea is that we have is to come up with a vehicle that's going to be able to to do the job for 80% the goods roughly, and so if you, because otherwise it's not financially viable. If you had to come up with a customized vehicle for each one of your client, because this client has packages of a certain dimension and that client has a different dimension
Sure.
and different weight, this thing would never be mass produced and be financially viable. So the whole idea was to come up with a solution that would be universal and fit every type of last mile delivery up to a certain
I
size, of
meant
course.
you mentioned earlier the market. What is how large is what's the total addressable market for this?
It's $1 trillion with a T in North America.
Wow,
It's gigantic. It is
it is
gigantic.
huge.
You have 6
Wow, $1 trillion.
million. Yeah, you do have 6 million class one and class two commercial vehicles in service in the United States, and a rate of replacement of about 500,000 a year, which is going to be only going up when you start talking about electrification of fleets. And so
Sure.
it's absolutely a gigantic market, and it's just North America, and then you're adding up Europe to that, and Asia, and I mean it's really an enormous market that we're going after.
So, um, speaking of going after the market, let's talk about that a little bit. So, uh, how are sales going thus far, and can people buy the vehicles in advance of production, and how's that going?
So yes, the demand is through the roof because on average, the cost of the driver is 65% of the cost of last and middle mile delivery, and this is only going to go up with the massive shortage of drivers that we're facing.
Mm-hmm.
So shippers and retailers and logistics companies are eager to get their costs down, as well as reduce the management overhead costs, managing drivers and all the problems that go with it, hiring and recruiting and the churn and everything. So they're eager to replace this with an autonomous system that is just all computer driven, and that's it. And it's a turnkey system. So the demand is through the roof, whether it's coming from fleet management companies, FMCs, that manage hundreds of thousands of vehicles on behalf of their customers, or from big fleet managers or companies that are retailers that are, or auto parts companies and others that are managing big fleets, right, and want to reduce the cost of shipping. So we have a goal of about somewhere between 35,000 and to 40,000 transporters between 2023 and 2028. 23 is the date at which time we're going to be starting production for commercial use of the transporter, the third generation vehicle that you saw. Right. And we're taking pre-orders already. And we are lucky enough to have thousands of pre-orders at this point.
Right. So what's encouraging around this, it's got to be for you, is to see that it's not just one little segment, not a niche of this kind of vertical but it's a very broad kind of demand, which I think bodes really well. Can you speak to your partnership a little bit more with Intel's Mobileye?
Yeah, absolutely. So we
not to. I just want to make sure, because the audience needs to understand what that really means, and it's UDELV and how it's going to propel the business forward.
Yes. So Mobileye is going to sort of power the autonomous driving system of the UDELV transporter, from supplying the hardware, which are the sensors, of a very, very strong suite of sensors that includes lidars, radars, and cameras. Mobileye is going to be powering the autonomous driving system of the transporter, and giving us or supplying a suite of sensors, sophisticated suites of sensors that includes lidars and radars and cameras, as well as the compute system that enables the autonomous driving technology to happen. The reasons why we chose to partner with Mobileye is because of this mapping coverage that the company has of North America, Europe, and Asia, which is very unique and enables a company like ours to scale and ramp up faster than other companies can.
It's a fascinating conversation, Daniel Laury. I have to tell you, I was really looking forward to this, and you have certainly delivered. Is there anything else before we sign off? Is there anything else that you feel you want to convey? Well, wait, let me digress 1 second. Obviously, startups are raising capital. How has that been for you? I can imagine what the demand that you're seeing for the technology. There's got to be a similar demand by the investment community.
Yeah, so far it's been really good for us, and there is
Hmm.
indeed a ton of interest from the investment community. I think the most important thing to say about us is that is two things where we're quite unique in the world of automotive. As the first one is that we do not require nowhere near as much capital as most other companies in the space for two reasons. The first one is that we're not developing a passenger car that needs to be produced at hundreds of thousands of units a year in order to be profitable. It is more in the tens of thousands that we're talking about with guaranteed revenue from our clients. And the second reason is that we are, thanks to our partnership with Mobileye, we do not have to spend the billions of dollars that other companies in the
Right.
space have to spend on the autonomous driving. And that's the beauty about UDELV, is that we can focus the entire resources of the company on creating the best product for our clients. Without having to spend those billions on the autonomous driving technology. And that's the reason why we're
Right.
far less capital intensive than any other company in the space.
Yeah, and less of a risk for sure. I
Absolutely.
can't thank you enough, Daniel, for carving out the time to do this with me. I'm excited about UDELV's future. And before we say goodbye, what's the best way to reach out to you and to follow UDELV? Uh, LinkedIn, any social digital contacts?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Phil, for the opportunity that you've given me today. And yes, the best way is either my email address, daniel@udelv.com, or on LinkedIn. Oh, absolutely.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I wish you and UDELV continued business success. And for our audience, thank you, Daniel Laury. And until next time, this is Phil Vogel saying, see ya.